out to him, and then we were just looking at your Instagram page, and we really loved your pictures.
Thank you.
Yeah, so she should be joining in a second, but yeah.
Awesome. No, thank you. Thank you so much. I was super excited. I tend to do a lot of these more like live, and so I bring a presentation and all that stuff. But as you said, like times have been rough, and this time around, I did ask you like what the topic was going to be, and basically, it was basically the spanning of my beginnings and how I developed my career, how I developed my niche. So I'll get into a little bit of that, as we move forward. Then, by the way, if anybody has any questions along the way, feel free to let me know. And I'll be more than happy to answer those as we go along.
And I'll try to monitor the chat. If anyone has a question, put it in the chat. I might jump in to interrupt to let you know that there's a question, so you don't have to keep up with what's happening.
Awesome, thank you. Super excited.
So with that, take over.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for having me. My name is Erick Hercules. I'm from Ecuador, and I go by Erick Hercules on the photography world. I've been doing photography for approximately 8 years now, and professionally for 6. I actually started as an opera singer when I came to America when I was 8, and I sang all the way until I was 20. And at 20, I decided to switch careers. I was doing economics because it gave me a little bit more time to do photography. And once photography picked up, I went on full throttle on that one. My inspiration really began through a lot of people have a lot of other photographers that inspire them. My inspiration personally comes from music, and I don't know if everybody here has seen sheet music, but there's like the melodies that go up and down. And I discovered, that levitation, which is my niche, which I'll get to how I discovered that, is almost like a reflection of the ups and downs in music. And the goal is to capture the melody of the frame as it's going up, and right before it comes down, that's where I want to capture it. And so that's normally like my theory behind my work. I actually began photography randomly. It was when Instagram was just starting, and I actually just started with an iPhone only. It was iPhone 5 at the time. And actually, let me see if I can pull out any images from those good old days, in which I didn't have any training. And so the key that I think helped me develop my eye in those younger years was going to the New York City and exploring. And one thing that I found really special was these things called puddlegrams. And so I don't know if anybody here has heard about them, but these are basically images taken from a puddle. And so I am finding a couple more. Oh, this one's a good one too. Okay. So let me present.
There's a button next to the leave button, little box.
Share tray, correct? Is that what it is?
Yep, little box with the arrow.
Can everybody see my screen?
Sometimes there's a delay.
There it is.
And we're good. We see you.
Awesome. So these two images, I think this one was taken at around 2015 and this one 2016-ish, but these are both with an iPhone 5. And as you see, like the reflection, this is what I loved, and I was obsessed with this at the beginning of my career. These are all iPhone only, and these were all taken with, and then edited with ViscoCam, which was free back then, which I don't think it is now, as well as Google Snapseed, which is an app that I highly recommend if you're on the fly and you want to like capture images with your phone. I want to see if I find any more of those puddlegrams, but as you can see, it was pretty much the basics of framing. So during this time, and this is something that I recommend all young photographers to do, is to go out and explore all your surroundings. I was lucky to, be raised up in the city, and I have all these buildings and the textures and the taxis. And so that was basically my goal, to go out there and then just try to, understand my eye via the phone. I think it's also one of the cheapest ways to be able to hone your eye. And also, I think it's one of the best ways to train, your eye into developing, the basics of. Okay, sorry, can you guys see?
We're good. You're muted now.
Sorry about this. My first time in Teams and Microsoft. So I think, going back to it, I would actually start, if some of you don't have a camera or have like a very cheap camera, I will bring it back and I will actually try to use my phone as much as possible, because with a phone, you don't have the excuse of, oh, you know what, I don't have a 50mm or like this particular lens or this particular frame. All you have is your phone and the framing that it provides. And with that, I'm sure you guys have spoken about the rule of thirds or the Fibonacci sequence or something called the dynamic composition, which is a building up from the rule of thirds. You learn how to master, how to compose. And once you're able to learn how to compose from those basics, then once you use a camera, I think you find yourself being more productive. And so, going back to this, these were like basically the roots. The way that I framed my images was pretty much, very basic. I liked the lines in the middle. I loved, the dynamic composition of like people walking on one side and then a car on the other. I think that we see the same motif across these two images. And so yeah, that was my way of kind of entering into photography. But then I figured out, okay, I really love this photography, but how can I do it for a living? Obviously these pictures are cool, but I don't think, I can sell enough of these to make a living. And that's when I started doing commercial photography. At that time, I started shooting one of my friends who was like a lifestyle guy at that time. And he actually, so I need to go back between presenting and not presenting. Apologies. Open share tray, desktop. Let me explain to you what I was talking about before with the lines and all that. Like these. So this is like the basics of my composition. If you see the lines, it's pretty much, one subject and then a second subject over there. So I like that there's always like these dynamics happening in a picture. Whenever you grab a picture, I think the most important part is to capture an essence of a movement or an attitude or something that is going somewhere. Going back to the music, music has a melody and there's always something going from A to B. And the beautiful thing about an image is that at times, you see where the car is going, but you don't know where the other side is over here. You see where this man is going, but you don't know what the next step is. You see, the face of this guy, and you see kind of like all these different things here and there that kind of pull you and make you question about what's happening in the photograph. So that's what I also love about creating these dynamics. And also, as I spoke about it earlier, but now you can see it, is the lines and all these compositions of people against subjects, which were very basic at that time, but I think were very important into to teaching me how to do photography. And then, as I said before, I couldn't really pay my bills with that. So I realized, okay, I have to start doing product photography. And that's where I came up with this concept, pretty much just called, levitation photography. It was just, at that time, I had worked for this brand called Stuttenheim, and Stuttenheim just gave me the concept. You probably have seen something like this. Gave me the deliverable ask of, you know what, we just want you to elevate the brand. And the minute that they said elevate the brand, I figured, you know what, I'm going to have my model jump. And that's exactly what I did in my first image. And I actually loved the way that it came out. It was something that I've never tried before. And I decided to incorporate, this one jumping thing across all of my images. And so, every time I do pretty much a campaign with a brand, I always have somebody levitating in the air. Let me see if you guys can't see those. So this is like the lifestyle guy that I began working with back in the day. His name is Friendly Lemorin. So he was basically my muse for the first 2 years, and we levitated with one brand after the other and after the other. But then I realized, it can get kind of old. Like, there has to be different ways of doing levitation, and that's when I incorporated throwing things in the air with my hands. So something like this. Like that one, or this one, I guess, would be the easiest. So as you can see, this concept right here is actually not that hard to execute. It's a high shutter speed. You guys know what high shutter speed is, and then just somebody throwing the whatever the subject is in the air. What I focus on, however, as you can see, the framing is going back to my initial concepts of photography. I like a cleanliness of style, so very, very straightforward lines, and this line is like just right below the middle, so that it can give a little bit more weight into this hand right here, and then all of this happening here contrasts the white space here, and then in the white space here, I decided to put the product in the middle. And from my opinion, that maximizes the way that the story is told with this shoe here. And so going back to my practice and to how to get here, it all began from the street photography. So for everybody listening, whenever you are having trouble shooting something or figuring out how to find your voice, how to find the way you want to tell a story, go outside and shoot everything. I shot a lot of portraits when I was beginning. I shot a lot of like street angles. I shot a lot of cars. I shot a lot of like even like clothing, like shoes or something, just to try to find different angles. But ultimately, you start finding patterns, and after you integrate those patterns into the way that you compose, it becomes way easier to tell a story. But then, so here we are, levitating shoes, and after a while, I found this to be boring as well, to be honest with you. It was just not compelling enough. And it's like, okay, how can we take it to the next level? People are like throwing things in the air. I see the hands there. And that's when I came up with like my last technique, which is me throwing the shoe or whatever the subject is in front of the camera. And that gave me such a different dynamic composition. And then it turned to something like this. So the difference here is that I threw the shoe, and the people in the back are incorporated into the frame by maximizing like whatever the thing is in front of them. So I'll let them know like, hey, put your hand this way, look up this way, and back, this will be like the empty space in contrast to where the other subjects are, and that's where I will put the shoe. And that kind of really elevated my creativity, because it allowed me to create things that all of a sudden became surreal. Things like this one, we did this for Nike in 2019 for the Air Max day, and these were the future collab. And so I realized, okay, what's something cool that can look futuristic but not? And so my take was, how about if we make them look like aliens taking over Earth or something? And so these were really fun to do. I had to count to 3 so that the models can jump at the same time that I was throwing the sneaker. Also very fast shutter speed. And also, if you look at the composition, once again, the basics are there. The middle, the line is pretty much right there in the middle. These lines right here kind of like add weight to the importance of the subjects right here. That levitation has a nice space between them and their shadows, and then obviously this one is the main motif here, and so that would be against everything that's happening to there. So after a while, you start seeing the same kind of like replica of like how I compose, and it becomes pretty clear. Another one right here. This one's one of my muses, Matthew Forget, who's a dancer, and we like to do surreal photography, and so pretty much right here, contrast the dark lines with this, and then stealing a little of this shadow and putting it a little bit over here, against the sun coming in from the left. And so that's basically, how I evolved into discovering levitation. Now, another thing that I have to speak about is, why did I start levitating shoes? One of my first gigs as a professional photographer was shooting footwear for like this very small like Foot Locker, in New York City. And I would carry around like 45 shoes at a time in a huge bag with like 40 pounds of camera equipment. And I would go around the city and shoot like 40 shoes a day. And, at that point, that was my way to make a living with photography. It wasn't very much fun, but I think it gave me the initiative to get out of my box, because what happened was, you shoot 3 pairs of shoes, amazing, but then by the 4th and the 5th and the 6th and the 12th and the 15th, you kind of become it becomes monotone, and the pictures all start looking the same. And so you start trying to figure out, like, how can I make it different? At that time I had already levitated people, and I realized, you know what, maybe I can add that levitation into my shoes. And so I started throwing them in the air, or like, let me see if I actually have a couple of images of my initial levitations. Please bear with me. Am I doing okay thus far, by the way? If you guys have any questions along the way, please feel free to let me know.
I'm riveted. I think I don't see any questions in the chat, but guys, feel free if you want to throw questions in, even to help remember to have them asked and answered later. So feel free.
So here you have my footwear collection. Some of the first images, as I said before, were with somebody throwing them in the air. These are not that hard to do, but the problem is, you don't have control as to how the shoes look. And so the amount of pictures you got to take has to be a lot more than necessary. So this was one of my first official campaigns for Palladium, which was one of my first like major footwear clients. And so you see basics again, the line in the middle, the contrast of this dark with this light over here. It kind of adds a little bit more weight into the importance of the shoe right here. And then as I developed, what are another basic shoe stuff that I've done? Oh, this was like a pretty basic shot, I think. But that was pretty much, what I did was I held the shoe like this, probably a little higher, probably the angle had to be like this. And then I dropped it. And the minute that I dropped it, I took the shot. Very fast shutter. I recommend, if anybody's trying to do levitation, to do 1/800th of a second. I think that's the prime. If not, better, more is better. But these were some of my basic ones at the beginning. And then after that, I realized, you know what? we can take it to the next level again. And then I started throwing 2 shoes in the air, and that also created this like surreal momentum into the product photography. And I guess that's where I really started taking footwear and fashion photography to, like, I would say a pretty creative level when doing, because it's one thing is, levitating a shoe might be easy, but levitating 2 shoes and 3 shoes and at times are like a bunch, like a whole campaign worth of shoes, it can get pretty crazy at times. But yeah, that's pretty much my journey to the footwear industry. And now I levitate all sorts of things. I realized that I don't want to be just a shoe photographer. Oh, this was one of the first images that I ever did. This is one of the pairs. I think it was like number 20 something, and I was so bored. I was shooting this in my parents' backyard, and I was like, how can I make these shoes look cool? And so what I did is, obviously, I threw this one up there. I held it up, and then 1, 2, 3, let go of my hand and shut it pretty quickly, and there we have this shot. Simple, but I think it does the job. A few things that I would like to mention as we talk about this journey is, a lot of the times we see the end product, the levitation that you see in my Instagram, but especially in this generation, I think we're very inclined for that immediate gratification. We want to see like the image that is in our head right off the bat. But it's taken me quite a long time to master this craft, so that so that I'm able to like finally like reap the product of my work. And so I recommend all of you, as you guys are beginning to find your voice in photography, to have a little bit of patience and don't judge yourself too hard, because before these images, I did a lot of things that were like, now that I look back, I'm like, wow, that required a little bit of work, or that was too saturated, or that was too contrasty. But it's part of that learning experience, because you go all the way left and you go all the way right and you go all the way left until you find a medium that works for you. And coming back to the main point that I wanted to make earlier is, shoot everything when you're beginning photography. Shoot everything, because you never know that shooting your friend's graduation will help you and teach you lessons that ultimately you'll be able to use when shooting a portrait of your first commercial portrait, or your first gig as a portrait photographer, or as a wedding photographer. So take all these things as a common, be very open-minded. A lot of artists cement themselves like, I'm a commercial photographer, I'm a wedding photographer, I'm a this. But what I say is, if you are a good photographer, I think you should be able to shoot pretty much anything, or at least have the understanding of how to shoot everything, because that will define, your full artistic capacity, so that if you're ever stuck in a hole, and let's say I don't have footwear gigs for the next 5 years, well, you know what, I can pick up, wedding photography, I can pick up portrait photography, I can pick up, car photography, because I've stepped into those verticals, before. And so go out there, get uncomfortable, make mistakes. The goal here is that as an artist, one thing that I did when I was first learning, I learned through YouTube University photography, was that I will see something I like, and then I will go out there and replicate it for like 2, 3, 4 hours. And so one of my favorite examples is slow shutter photography at night. I don't know if you guys have seen, but it's like, you see a highway and then you see the red lines of the car in the back. And I was like, how do you do that? You need like a different camera for that? And I realized, no, you can do that with, any kind of camera, as long as you know how to work with the settings. So I went out there one night and I spent, a lot of hours by a highway doing slow shutter. And I will put the shutter all the way down to like, 1/50th of a second and see how that works. And then it will be too much. So then I'll turn it back to 1/20th. It will be, maybe not enough. So then I'll put it back to like 1/35th of a second or something. And then I'll find the balance. And that to me is the best way that you can experience photography, because a lot of the time, you hear about these theories and techniques and like you have to do this and the contrast and this, but it is not until you experience it that you come to realize that knowledge gets internalized. So instead of reading about it, read about it, but then go act upon it. And that will be my 2 cents here. What is another thing that I can tell you about photography?
Well, I'll interject a little bit. There's some questions in the chat.
Oh, yes, sir.
And don't worry about it. So one from Danielle Aguilar, she asked, what is the favorite shoot you've ever done? So I'm assuming, and I'll ask Danielle to explain, is that professional? Is it personal? What are you asking, Danielle?
Very good question.
I'm not sure Danielle can unmute to clarify. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just asking in general, just like if you've had a shoot that stood out to you or it was just really meaningful to you.
It's so funny because when you change the parameters of what the photography like is, it can be the same thing that you've been doing forever, but all of a sudden you have to do it for like a big client. The shoot that kind of changed my life was a shoot like just a year into my photography career, when I was doing this global campaign for Swatch, and I got a call from them, and then they were like, hey, we'd love to, for you to shoot this Swatch campaign. And I was like, amazing, like let me know when. And they were like, 3 days from now. I was like, are you serious? And so I went to Las Vegas to shoot it. We literally flew in, I ate tacos, and then we went immediately to shoot. And we only had 2 hours with the talent that they contracted to get the shot. And so here I was, like looking at this, my first major gig, like doing the things that we've already done, but the parameters of like what the agency wanted was like so clear. We want this, and it needs to be looking like this, and the watch needs to be looking like this. And never have I ever had somebody like tell me exactly what to do. And it was something that kind of like shook me, but also made me realize, oh wait, like there is I would say a way that people want this image to be. I've never really spoken to anybody before. I've always done my own thing, and so this kind of took me out of the box, but also made me realize, oh okay, like it challenged me, like, oh, can you do this? Like, yes I can. I only have 2 hours. So here we were shooting in the middle of Las Vegas, and then we had to send the images back to Germany that same day. So it was like one of the quickest photo shoots ever. We got the shot in like probably like 45 minutes in, and I still remember it because it was such an empowering moment when when you take that shot, exactly like that frame, and you're like, yes, that checked all the boxes. It made me feel good as an artist. Like it makes the brand look good, and it was the first time I felt like photography was a sport. I know there's a lot of people that can debate me on this, but to be honest with you, I look at photography like a sport. In what way? You know, Kobe, you know, LeBron James, they get judged on how many baskets they make, right? I think photographers get judged on how many good shots they make, you know, good photography shots they make. And so one of my goals, you know, ever since that day was to, instead of shooting burst mode, I don't know if all of you guys are aware of what burst mode is, but it's like when you press the button and the camera just goes, and then you end up taking like 40 shots at this, you know, in one time. I started taking all these levitation images you guys see there in one take. And the reason I did that was because I realized if I am able to grab every image that I want in one take, that means that I'm ready to do, you know, this watch campaign any day of the week. And funny enough, that campaign and that, you know, stress that was with me during that campaign kind of helped me become a better photographer now, because I was so versed with my camera. I knew exactly when the click signified the shot that I wanted, and I was one with my instrument. And it translated to a couple of scenarios. I was with Steve Aoki one time in the UK for one of his concerts, and I had one shot to take with Steve Aoki. Actually, let me see if I can find the Steve Aoki image. And so I literally couldn't fail. You know, if I failed that levitation shot with Steve Aoki, it would have been like, can we do it again, please? You know, and I didn't want to be that guy. And as I told you before, I want to do it in one shot, and we did it. And it was great, but it was also heartbreaking, but at the same, heart-wrenching, but at the same time, I had practiced enough because of that specific campaign swatch, you know, 5 years before.
Well, now, as you explain it as a sport, I mean, you don't just go out and play the best game of your life. You've got to practice. So, I mean, you're talking about hitting that campaign, but you also talked earlier about take pictures all the time, everywhere, all around you, and that's part of your like training. That's part of your practice, right?
Amen. And you know, a lot of people, like, especially now in the social media age, like you do it for the accolades, the likes. Like, I want this brand to see me. I want to show people like that I'm in this place. You need to kind of, like, as an artist, you need to leave all of that behind and focus on telling a story that is authentically you, and that is a reflection of, you know, your exploration of life and how you want to, you know, indicate that. And as you explore and as you take more photos, you're going to come to realize that you don't even need to think about shutter speed and aperture and focal length and all these things anymore. They're all going to be part of you. And once you internalize them, you save all this time, and all of a sudden you can converse with the image and you can actually create something that is truly yours, and you have a technical understanding of more than before. You know, so yes, I agree. You have to just practice, and practice for the sake of practicing, not for posting it on Instagram. I'm trying to find this Steve Aoki one. I'm so sorry. Take a trip, pride people. Okay, I found it. So this is the Steve Aoki one. He had just finished his concert, and as you can see, if you really zoom in here, a lot of noise, and that was because it was shot at like I think it was like 1800 ISO or something. There was absolutely no light, and for levitation, you need a lot of light because it's fast shutter speed, right? So this one was like pretty much everything I hate about like a shoot. No time, I have one shot, and it's super dark. And so I had to push my ISO just to make up for the fact that, you know, it was dark, and go for it. And we went for it. I'm not gonna lie, it's a little blurry, but I think it, you know, it adds to a cool effect there. A similar story happened with, I don't know if you guys know who Erica Badu is. You guys might be too young for her, but she was also like an artist. But similar story here. You know, I had one shot with Erica Badu. This was at the Pierre Moss behind the scenes, approximately 2016, 17 show. And yeah, she had like all these little cool buttons, and I was like, Erica, can I levitate with you? All I need is, you know, one shot. And yeah, she chose this one that said lean, and I had pretty much one shot. As you can see, I think this one's also like a little blurry, but it is part of the experience, you know. So these were shot probably like 3-4 years apart, but the technicality and the effort's still there. Another thing that I want to show you lately that I've been exploring with is switching my angle. So these are, you haven't seen these before. These will be posted soon on my Instagram. I actually took these this morning. I went to a sunrise shoot at the Empire State Building. And, you know, what do you see here but, you know, a city flipped backwards? And what does this even mean? And this can be very debatable, but I'll explain as to why these are the way they are. I've realized that, you know, as an artist, your vision is very subjective. And I went to opera school, and in opera school, what I felt was that opera is a very rigid art form, and opera is also very, like, when you're classically trained, you have to follow certain guidelines. And as an artist, I felt really constricted as a musician because I couldn't really be my full self. But the beautiful thing about photography is that there's no right or wrong. It's just a feeling. And it's beautiful because you get to explore a lot of feelings. And if you actually look through my Instagram and a lot of photographers' Instagram, and as you scroll down, you're able to kind of tell when they're, you know, happy, when they're sad, when they're moody. So this is how I'm feeling currently. You know, the world is very, very weird right now. And, you know, a lot of us live in different realities. And it's always so it's a different feeling, you know. And what I've been kind of evoking with my art lately is, you know, I've done this levitation stuff for shoes, but I wanted to kind of get internal a little bit. And this is my city, a city that I love, and it's supposed to be, you know, that will be the correct shot. In fact, people will tell you that that will be the correct shot, right? But, you know, what is correct? Correct is just, but, you know, an objective thing in photography. And so my presentation of it like this one's called Exit Through the Left. And it's pretty much, you know, you come in through here and you like exit through the left. But my
you stopped sharing.
Oh,
but,
I'm so sorry.
No worry. But it did ring true. I would think that all of us, all of my students, we have done the entire year online. So our world is flipped inside out. And you know, their high school life is not from the perspective that is traditional. So your perspective there in your city in New York, I think does ring true to what they're seeing.
Thank you. Yeah, so I was going to say, you know, a lot of the critics will tell you either this one is the right way to put it or even this side, you know, which is not even like a correct angle for this particular crop. But, you know, that, I mean, that can kind of look cool too, you know, but I felt like, you know, that's a very straightforward answer to my photo. Like when you look at it, you're like, oh, it's amazing. That's a city, like that's a street, cool. But if I were to flip it like this, sorry, I don't know why it's weird right now. But if I were to flip it like that, then what we will find is that, you know, that really makes you think, like, first of all, what is that? You know, and so when you're scrolling down Instagram and you see something like this, you're like, wait, that is what? Makes no sense. But I mean, if you look at it compositionally wise, you know, I did follow my kind of like rule of thirds, and I kind of followed my sorry, I don't know why it's doing this. My compositional rules, I would say, so that this one goes. Sorry. All right. So that this, you know, this, if you look into the rule of thirds, I guess, you know, I like when my shots begin from somewhere and then somewhere else. And this particular place right here is where the first line of the rule of thirds will fall. So pretty archaic, I would say, composition, but, you know, I think it works for me in my current mood. And once again, you know, you can look at this image and say, you know what, I don't like it. Or you can look at this image and say, oh my God, that's amazing. Both of those, you know, taken and appreciate it because, you know, you have your own persona too. So the key here is just, you know, to find your own voice. Another thing that I highly recommend, you know, to check out is pretty much doing stuff with a lot of empty space and just big shadows. Whenever you have those, you know, those spaces to play with, I highly recommend, you know, play around with those. The beautiful things that you get to really maximize, you know, somebody's so little here, but it adds all these lines, adds so much importance to that subject. And, you know, these empty spaces maximize your subjects there. Any other cool things that I have to show you guys?
Well, if you want, I'll jump in again with the chat. And I think you've answered some of the questions. There's two questions about, do you plan on staying in shoe photography? And then another one talking about your professional versus your personal interest in photography. And as I can see already with Steve Aoki and Erick Badu, your photography is financially going in different directions. It's not just shoes and product. And we had a couple people get really excited in the chat that you shot for Erick Badu. So talk about, like, again, your professional interest, and then your personal photography. And I think that city picture is also a personal, not professional. Does that make sense?
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And it's so funny because, so this is what happened. I developed this levitation technique, and I kind of sold myself to the to the commercial gods, we'll say, and I started shooting all these shoes and all that. But to be honest with you guys, I felt a little bored after a while. And so for the last 2 years, I will say, like, yes, I was working on all these gigs, but I was feeling a little empty inside, and I didn't know what to do, because levitation, is my passion, but at the same time, I wasn't getting enough of what I used to get when I first began, which was like, when I was exploring my vision and trying to find my eye. But during this pandemic, we all had a lot of time to think about why it is the things we're doing. And as an artist, ultimately, what you do is art, A-R-T. It's not sell shoes. It's not, like shoot with a famous person. What you do is communicate an emotion. And that's what I did with levitation, but I took it via the commercial route because, I had to make money. I had to pay my bills. And when I went on that full throttle, what I did is that I kind of sold out a piece of my soul, and I had to regain that back. And what I did over the last couple of months, if you look into I still shoot shoes because I just like shooting shoes, I guess. But if you look into my images, a lot of stuff that I'm shooting now, it's more conceptual, like the lines and the weird lines that I'm doing. Like, this is the side of a building, this one right here is also a side of a building, just flipped backwards. And it was more to kind of go back to where I first began. And you can see now, these images look completely different than the Instagram images, iPhone only, that I shot earlier in my career, but they still carry the same components, two subjects here, rule of thirds, and like the maximization of like this and that, and the tones are more like movie-esque. So I started really playing and expanding and going back to what it is that I loved in photography, and then I started doing, more portraits and stuff, like just my friends hanging out and just rediscovering my purpose as to, why did I begin in the first place? So when you begin the journey of photography, you have to look at it both ways. Like, these are the things I will do to make money. Like, for me, it was footwear photography and fashion photography, but these are also the ways that I stay sane and I will fall in love with my art, which was me shooting landscapes in a weird way and me shooting my friends in a weird way, So these are pretty much, the same thing. So a lot of my friends here now, I never really levitated my friends. I was always like, no, it needs to be commercial. But all of a sudden I realized, what, I was missing on so many memories that I can look back and say, what, it was cool that I levitated my friend Pierre. It was cool that I levitated my friend Joe. And so, as we're going into this new year, that's pretty much my goal, is to levitate with friends a lot more often, and then just do levitation for the artistic aspect of levitation, not for the commerciality of the levitation. Another friend here. And also, going back to my basics, street photography, where I came from, and trying to just really hone in on my perspective and really hone in on my storytelling that, once made me fall in love with photography, and going back to that. Now, what was the second question again? I'm sorry.
Well, so that was part of, one question was, do you plan on staying into shooting shoes? The other question was, what is the difference between your professional and your personal? And it sounds like you've addressed some of that. Finding that balance between professional and personal, and then you've also addressed that shoes is not your only game. You also work with other clients and artists and individuals. So I think you've addressed it. Other people, if you want to put questions in the chat or unmute, I will ask another question, and that is one thing that I'm going to pretend to be in the minds of a lot of the students. You know, they're all in high school, and one of the things is life can be very prescribed. You need to take this class, you need to get this school, you need to do well, you need to do this, and kind of like a direct linear path. Sounds like, I mean, you went from opera. Well, I'll even take it further. I mean, you were not originally from New York, correct?
Correct.
So you know, your life brought you to New York, and then it was opera, and now it's photography. So talk a little bit about the reality of, but also the lack, you know, the fear of this direct path versus this following your passion.
Oh, that's such a good question, you know, because society has a perception of like what success is, you know, and as an artist, you pretty much always have to find your own path, and that at times means you have to go against the grain. And you know, to be completely honest with you guys, you know, when I switched from opera to photography, my mom sat me down and she said, "Listen, I supported you in opera. The chances of you making money in opera are very slim. You know, I don't know if you guys know, but opera is like such a small niche, and the percentage of people making it, there's like 0.01%. Secondly, you know, she said, now you're moving into photography. Like, how do you expect to like do anything with your life? You know, and it kind of took me aback because although they have supported me in singing since I was very little, this was I mean, I didn't blame them. I was going through a different uncharted path of an art that they never really, you know, saw for me. And also as a South American, I think that they also have a lot of preconceived notions of who they think you should become, because, you know, my parents immigrated here, worked super hard to be here, worked super hard to maintain me and grow and make me grow, you know, with everything that I had. But also, you know, to become a photographer, what? You know, but one thing I learned, in fact, I had to make my own choices, and that actually included, you know, when I was in college, I ran away from home once and said, you know what, Mom, like, I'm going to go live with my friends, but I'm going to go. And every single day that I was out there, I was shooting photos. I was understanding. I don't know if you guys know the Humans of New York guy, but I was actually on his second book shooting a puddlegram. So I was shooting a puddlegram, and he found me and he was like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm shooting a puddlegram. So that's where I actually, that was a little sign for me, because it was like, you know, Humans of New York, that guy is, he's such a beautiful energy because he loves celebrating different. And when I saw him, it was just when I was about to come back home. And that was kind of like a little sign, like, wow, you know what? Like life is putting impactful people in front of you. And after that, I was like, you know what? Like, let me give this a couple of months worth of shot. Let's see what comes out of this. And I kid you not, I went from, you know, like working, you know, doing marketing for this theater at my school to, you know, getting hit up by this brand called Staple Pigeon New York, which is like, it's like a streetwear brand by Jeff Staple. And then the second day I got hit up by this boot brand, Palladium Boots, to shoot my first campaign. And it was like the first gig that I did was like, it was worth like $4,000 or something. And I have never seen that much money in a day in my life. And all of a sudden, like, you know, the doors opened, but it wasn't until I had sacrificed a lot, I had gone against the grain, and I had like proven to myself that like I'm really about it. And you know, when it comes to life, a lot of things that life brings to you, a lot of blessings that life brings to you, aren't always in a pretty package. Life is very rough, and you're not going to understand it until you go out and live by yourself. But when you do, you start realizing that all that roughness that you had to go through ultimately made you stronger. And I know it's corny to say, but it's actually such a fact. You know, as I sit here today, I realize like I wouldn't be the person that I was today. I wouldn't be the creative, the guy levitating the shoes, if it wasn't for the fact that, you know, I had to carry those 45 shoes 5-6 years ago, and like no one was giving a hell about, you know, who the hell Erick is. And so, you know, you have to put in the work and be patient. And if you really see yourself willing to work hard to achieve something, there is absolutely no way that you can't make it. I'm telling you, because if I made it, everybody in this class can make it. And one thing I recommend is also not taking the easy way forward. As an artist, you really live through your art. And I hope that, you know, you guys see a little bit of my passion through my work. It's like, I really live through my work. I want to be, you know, the best I can be through my images, so that I can communicate a surreal feeling to my audience. And it came through a lot of these experiences. So, you know, I challenge all of you to go out there and challenge your perspective. You know, I keep doing this, but it keeps failing. Well, maybe try it from the bottom, maybe try it to the side, try bouncing some light across it. You know, like, be around, be playful, shoot it with a, you know, slower shutter speed, and then move it so you can create a blur dynamic or something. You know, there's so many different things that you can do with a camera, and none of that will be right or wrong. It's up to you. Because, you know, a lot of you might have seen fine art photography, for example, and a lot of them make no sense. But guess what? They make all of the sense to the artist. And when you read the bio or the description about what it means to them, all of a sudden your mind gets blown and you're like, oh my God, I completely see it. Like, I see the dynamics between this and that, or the color or the shade or the, you know, the model or whatever it is. And you get to understand and actually explore a little bit of who they are via their images. And I hope that you guys, you know, see a little bit of who I am with my images.
Want to respect your time. We said we'll go to 2:30. We got about 10 minutes left. Somebody, don't be shy. I'd love to hear someone else's voice. I've read out some of the questions in the chat, but please cue yourself up, unmute, do what you need to do. Ask a question while we got Eric, or put it in the chat, please.
If you guys want me to like let you know like the secret to do levitation photography, let me know. I will be coming up with a class in the next month, but it's don't buy it. Like, you guys are, yeah, it's good. But what I recommend is, look, so if you want to shoot something, you know, in the air, for example, like this headphone thing, what you do is you set your camera on pre-focus mode. So when you pre-focus on it, what happens is when you focus on it, the focus is set, and all you have to do is pretty much boop, shoot it, because it's already focused. The mistake a lot of people make is, you know, they try to focus it while it's shooting, but the camera is wasting time on focusing while shooting, and so they're never going to get the shot. So levitation is all about maximizing your timing, because 1/15 of a second can make the difference between the right shot and the wrong shot. So pre-focus your shot, set it up to 1/800. I recommend that you shoot in a very bright place. You know, going back to the framing, make sure that you frame the image before. In fact, I would actually recommend, if you were to, like, even before you put the subject in front of the frame, make sure that that frame is good enough that you can even, you know, use that image by itself. The subject is just an addition, you know, it's filling the empty space. And when you work at it like that, you're telling two stories, a beautiful background, but you're also telling the story of the subject. And once you have it all pre-focused in the way that you want it, you have it, you know, ready to be shot, 1/800 of a second, 1, 2, 3, boom, and that's your shot.
Rose, do you have a question? I see you.
You might have answered this, but I kind of had a question where it's like, you know, you have your levitation. Do you think it really gives you a bit of an advantage almost in this field, having like a niche that's so unique? Do you think that sort of like helps you?
Oh, 100%. I'm not going to lie to you. But, you know, I had to dive into this levitation for enough for people to understand that it was my niche. Because a lot of times, a lot of photographers in the field follow the trends. And so one day they're shooting film photography, the next thing they're doing like artist photography, the next thing they're going to concerts to shoot the artist for free. But what happens is they represent everything, but they represent nothing at the same time, you know? And so what I wanted with my work was, if you close your eyes and think of an Erick Hercules image, what is it? You know, and you'll see something in the air. You'll see blue clouds in the background. You'll see like a clean city, you know, slightly bokeh out, and then the subject of something in the air, you know? And so for you guys, as you guys go and explore, you know, your vision, whether it is portrait photography or something like that, shoot, as I said, everything so that you find the way that you tell your story the best. For me, levitation was the best connection between music and photography, you know, and so that is very dear to me. It's not like I made it up to be famous, or I made it up to work with brands, or I made it up. It came from the heart first. It came from, you know, my experience. And so all of you should dig into your experiences. And if you haven't had enough experience, go out there and experience the world a little better. Maybe you have a brother or a sister or a sibling, or maybe you want to shoot your mom and dad. Like, hey, can I just test, this light is beautiful in the backyard. Can I shoot you really quick? Can like you get, weird poses. At times, like the weird poses produce like the most beautiful images, So get uncomfortable, because in that uncomfortability is where you will be able to find your voice. Once you find your voice, like myself, stick to your guns. I went through a very low period in 2017. So 2016 was like my height, where like I was shooting for all these brands and all that stuff. 2017 is where film came along. And when film came along, all of these brands that I had worked with for years were like, well, we're about to do film photography. Like, this is the cool thing now. We're going to jump onto it. And I went from having all of these clients to having basically no clients. And it was very heartbreaking to me, because as an artist, sometimes you think, like, oh, they're going to work with me, like, they like my vision, but then you realize at the end of the day, it's just marketing. And so that kind of redefined my mindset when it came to my photography. And you know what? Instead of going to film like every other photography would, I stuck to my guns and I stuck to levitation. And now we're coming back full circle, in which everybody's doing film, and they're like, we're kind of looking for something different. And like, guess who there is to levitate these shoes? Like, here I am. And so you have to stick to your guns. And as an artist, if you guys are thinking of doing it full time, just get ready, because it's a very, very rough job. Like, there's a lot of highs, like the shooting the Erick or the Stevie Aokis, or like all these NBA players or whatever. But there's also a lot of those lows in which you might not have work for a month. You have to constantly pitch. You have to do your own taxes. You have to do. So be aware of all these things. But first and foremost, I would love for you guys to develop your vision and get yourselves out of your comfort zones as much as possible. That's the most important thing that you should do as a photographer.
And I think that you did a good job explaining. It's not that you have a trick, it's that you have a perspective, and your perspective is levitation and the surroundings. And so for everyone else, don't think like, well, he's already taken that trick, what trick can I have? It's not a trick, it's a perspective.
Correct. It's a difference between a viral moment and something that you can call your own technique, your own vision. If David LaChapelle, for example, all these vibrant colors and like crazy photos, dynamic lighting, compositions, and weirdness, but that's David LaChapelle for you, and that creates an instinct feelings. When you close your eyes and think David LaChapelle, boom, I see greens and purples and blues and weird looking outfits, but like they all make sense, and so that goes for every other photographer that you want to recognize. It's like, oh, they have a distinct vision, and your job as an artist is to find that vision that is truly uniquely yours.
Other questions, guys? Anyone else? And thank you, Rose.
Thank you, Rose.
Well, somebody can jump in. If not, I'm gonna jump back to Sarah, who discovered Erick for us. And let Sarah take us out. But again, if anyone else has a question, please ask. Okay. I want to personally thank you. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Sarah, if you don't mind coming back and thanking Erick and saying goodbye and dismissing us, that's great. We'll also, our meager Instagram following of 12 people, we will make sure to thank you on that as well. But I do appreciate it.
Oh, and I appreciate you guys having me. Thank you so much. And I'm always here if you guys send me a DM. I might be a little slow to answer at times, but if you have any questions, I'm always here. And best of luck on your journey. The most important thing with photography is just to have fun, and don't take things too personal. So look at it as a journey, and you'll do just fine. Thank you so much for having me, Mr. Robinson.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you for being here. I feel like I learned a lot today about photography, and I'll definitely use some of these tips and tricks that you taught us today in the future. Oh,
awesome. Thank you so much for finding me, Sarah, and your friend as well. Yes, they're very appreciated. Awesome. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Have a wonderful weekend, and keep on shooting, guys.